Hello, this is Raymond with my co-host Laurie Pycroft, and welcome to the first series of interviews as part of the Happiness Festival. We're joined today with two very special guests, Alison Darcy, CEO and founder of Woebot, and Athena Robinson, Chief Clinical Psychologist at Woebot. Alison is a clinical research psychologist who specializes in digital health treatment and is part of the adjacent faculty at the Psychiatry and Behavioral Science at the Stanford School of Medicine. Athena is a clinical psychologist and an associate professor from the same faculty with a focus on eating disorders and dialectical behavioral therapy. Both Alison and Athena are pioneers in helping to bridge the two fields of clinical psychology and AI through programs such as Woebot, and we're more than grateful to be able to host them. Alison and Athena, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, Raymond. Great to be here.
So I was wondering maybe we could start with some background questions. What is Woebot and where did the inspiration for Woebot come from?
Woebot is an emotional support platform delivered in a conversational kind of format based on cognitive behavioral therapy, but also with elements of dialectical behavioral therapy and interpersonal therapy. So some of the most contemporary approaches to mental health that we have, all delivered in a very, very simple, conversational interface. Woebot sort of reaches out to you every day, checks in how you're doing, and depending on your answer and depending on how you're feeling at the moment, it can either invite you to complete a skill based on some great psychological tools, or can tell you a story that teaches you something from a core curriculum of educational concepts. I think the idea came from several places, a convergence of different things. I was, as I said, sort of faculty at Stanford. I was making treatments and also seeing patients, and a lot of young patients in particular. I was in child and adolescent psychiatry, and there was a few things. Became obvious that the need for mental health approaches and services was increasing. But aside from that, undeniable and kind of rapid increase in demand was also coming sort of expectation that the way in which we deliver help to people would also be shifting in line with our kind of shifting lives that we have and the different kinds of tools that make up our day-to-day lives these days. So, very much felt for young people in particular, and just thought, wow, this form factor has not really improved or changed since the basic foundations in the 1890s when Freud, was doing his thing in Vienna. So I think the problem that we really set out to fix was not how can we make something that we do in the clinic in a digital way. That has actually been done for quite some time, about 2 decades. But how can we do it in a way that makes people want to engage every single day? That was the real challenge. And so we started actually making quite gamified experiences. We made CBT themed video games, but of course games being really broad concept, and basically very personal, immersive experiences. And then found our way to Woebot. Woebot was prototype number 13. And as soon as we made it, we could see that people were really engaging with it in a very, very different way, and that there was something special there.
So from your experience, what's usually the type of people who actually uses Woebot?
We have a wide range of users. And what's interesting, I think, given Alison's description as well, is that you might think it would tend naturally towards younger individuals, given the fact that it is a software application that maybe younger people have higher levels of comfort with such methodologies and delivery modalities. But we find a wide range of ages use our application. So on average, our users are around 25 to 35 years of age, but we do have users from every age group up through and including, 65. We right now suggest that the app be utilized among adults only, so people over age 18, but we are interested in exploring and validating the application more formally in an adolescent population, simply because Well, we think that it could be quite useful there, and early data suggests that it will be, but also because the inbound requests we've received, right, Ali, from parents and clinics and a lot of different people expressing interest in using that among a teen group. So in terms of age, we see it all the way across the board. In terms of self-reported gender, we also see a pretty even split. It's about 60-40 female to male of self-reported gender, that is, and which is really exciting for us as well, because traditionally and stereotypically, self-identified males are less likely to seek mental health treatment. So it's really been quite nice to have a platform in which folks feel comfortable and willing to come on board and talk with us. So wide range of age usership, wide range of gender as well, pretty even split there. And then in terms of where we are across the globe, at our height, we were in over 120 countries, even though we're only in English. So our next one of our next ventures would be considering translation ultimately to reach more people. But we are also well represented around the world, lucky enough to be.
What I'm curious about is actually, because with the surprising, for example, gender effects, do you think it's because, in some sense, because Woebot is a robot, and that's why they're more likely to seek help from a robot when compared to an actual therapist? Do you think there's a actual distinction there in reasons why they seek help?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think one of the things that we have to be really honest with ourselves about is that while we advocate and want to see stigma surrounding mental illness go down, and I think we are beginning to see some of that, that it's still here in some ways, right? And so a lot of people feel more comfortable talking to an AI or to a computer-based form of emotional support rather than a therapist. So in some instances, and also there is some data to suggest that men, I believe it was out of a study from the UK, were 300 times more likely to talk about their stress and financial concerns to an AI-delivered support system rather than to a human. So in some ways, I do think that aspect is really welcoming to individuals who might otherwise be inhibited to share.
Yeah, there's actually a lovely study as well that was done in Southern California for a very large population where people were invited to talk to what they called a virtual therapist. And one of the groups was randomized to see the virtual therapist when they were told there's a human behind everything that she says. And then the other group were randomized to see the virtual therapist when they were told the truth, which is like, this is just an AI. And they found that people who were randomized to the AI group were more likely to disclose personal things and had sort of deeper conversations as rated by expert therapists. So we do know that both men and women would actually rather talk to an AI about certain things than a human. And that kind of made sense to us, even though it's very, as Athena said, very counter to what we believe. And we know that it's still important to talk about things when you're upset. The trouble is that's just really hard to do. And it's so interesting, because when you're struggling, and mental illness itself is almost a state of disconnect. And yet this is the time when we ask people to reach out and talk to someone, and it can be the time when it's most difficult to do that. So we made Woebot to be this really easy on-ramp towards talking about something, getting it off your chest. And we think it fits really nicely with the existing human services as well.
Really cool. So is Woebot a RCT support, random controlled trial interventions supported sort of chatbot, or is it the only one?
It was the first. We did the first randomized control trial of CBT-based chatbot, and we've done another 2 Stanford-led studies since, and there's a lot more in the pipeline. We were. Athena and I have, we both had research labs, and so we had done a lot of treatment development work, and I had done a lot of digital treatment development work, and it was remarkable, I have to say. Seeing the data from the first study was just very exciting and encouraging. And I think for the first time, we found this kind of form factor that felt very easy for people, and that just made it really easy to talk every day, to reach out and to kind of do the quote unquote homework that is sometimes just so difficult to do. Like any good habit, right? It's very difficult to establish. So yeah, we're really proud of the research that's been done, and we continue to be committed to demonstrating those outcomes as well as we move forward.
So where do you actually see the role of Woebot in mental health? Is it supposed to be in conjunction, or is it in replacement of human therapists?
Well, it's a great question, Raymond, and Alison can probably vouch as well as I can. And one of the most common we receive. And I'm so glad that we do, because it's really a point that we would love to get across. So we do believe that there is a wonderful place in the mental health care system for that phenomenal human-to-human relationship. It's really something that's quite important. Even I, even though I'm honored to be, chief clinical officer at Woebot Labs, I still have my private practice, and so I still see people one-on-one. There's something really special and important about that human delivery for those who need it. However, decades worth of guided self-help research have demonstrated that not everybody needs an advanced degree holding specialty trained expert in a particular area, that really people can see improvements with much lower levels, if you will, of care, not as time intensive, not as expensive for either the provider or the individual seeking the care. So we really do see Woebot as not replacing. Rather, we wanted to add to the spectrum and the rainbow of mental health care options available to people worldwide, so that they can make a choice for themselves about trying out Woebot and about maybe seeking different types of care later. So Woebot can be used in combination with ongoing therapy. We have several of our users who share that their therapists even recommended Woebot, because it's a way practically to practice session skills outside of that one therapy hour. It keeps you up to speed with the different sort of cognitive behavioral skills your therapist might want you to do. Some people also use Woebot before they seek help from a more formal professional person. Maybe they are curious about their mental health. Maybe they want to explore whether or not they could benefit from this type of work, so they dabble a little bit there. And then the last way often folks might use Woebot is after discharge from a higher level of care. They might use it in a way to continue with their skills and keep them kind of well-oiled and up to speed. So we definitely think of Woebot as an add rather than a replace.
I think, Raymond, I always use the analogy of like the tennis ball machine. The mechanical thing that shoots tennis balls at you. Like Woebot allows you to practice challenging your negative thoughts over and over again in a way that just wasn't available before. And so just like a tennis ball machine, that, it allows you to sort of effectively, practice your swing. But does that tennis ball machine actually, threaten the existence or try and replace an actual game of tennis with another human? No, right? It complements them really well. In fact, it can probably make you better for that human to human game. We think about Woebot as the same way, just this really easy, accessible way to practice therapeutic skills.
So one opportunity at least I see is for Woebot, because it's digital, to be used in vulnerable populations. So for those who can't afford traditional therapists, do you think this sort of tennis ball machine could actually help them improving their mental health, or do you think this can actually help them in the process to even without a therapist?
We think there's a substantial value for both cases, actually. And in particular, one of the things that we're looking at is Woebot being wrought and delivered to large populations. So, for example, in the US here, we have like a few states that are covered by one health provider, or something akin to the NHS in the UK. We actually know from the broader treatment outcomes literature that a lot of people, as Athena mentioned earlier, can do really well with a low intensity, non-intrusive, self-guided program. And we want to be able to serve those people. And then we also are able to understand when somebody is not necessarily responding and may need more help. And so Woebot does both of those things, the sort of monitoring over time and suggesting higher level of care. but also being able to deliver like a pretty good program for those who are able to make use of it.
One other thing that I'm quite interested in is there an actual study on the long-term efficacies of Woebot? So we know there's an RCT, but is there something that looks at whether when people use Woebot for a long amount of time to like train themselves, does it actually work for example, relieving depression or anxiety?
Indeed, yeah. Well, the initial RCT demonstrated it could relieve some symptoms of depression and anxiety. I think the long-term usage over time is something that we're beginning to understand. And it's really, really interesting to see people using Woebot over for a year and longer. And those people kind of use it in this like as needed way. So people might use it for 2 weeks to a month at the start and then come back to Woebot whenever they're in a moment of need, which is really a pretty cool and privileged, I think, position for Woebot to be in. But I think that really mirrors just, what we all go through in life, right? Like there's ups and downs, and, you can, and depression itself, and Athena can speak to this more better than I can, but depression itself, it's episodic. And so when you recover, you also have to actively kind of maintain that mental health over time. And then inevitably there are occasions for all of us that we experience more stress, or we lose a loved one, or there's a lot of anxiety due to various life events. I mean, these are the things that just make us all human, and that's why kind of it's really nice to be able to turn to something that has where it works for you, and it has also learned from you what works for you and can offer that. And so I think that's a really special opportunity for us, but we're just beginning to understand it.
And with the recent pandemic, I imagine there'll be a lot of demand for something like Woebot. Has the company or the chatbot itself done anything to help during the pandemic?
We did indeed. We launched our coronavirus program of content on March 17th, which were just these beautifully crafted conversations that were aiming to just like keep people grounded and lift spirits a little bit, rather than giving more information, because I think we're really inundated in it. And that was really special for us to do. And we've had incredible feedback from people. We actually doubled our daily active users after launching the program. And we also built a web tool that just sits on our website to give people a flavor of what Woebot can do without having to download the app. And we translated that into Italian for integration into the Italian Health Ministry's website. So that was really just a very cool thing for our team to be able to do at a time of need for all of us, really.
I just figured I'd sort of come in there. So Woebot seems uniquely placed to gather large bodies of data from its users and input that into machine learning algorithms in order to start generating new conversations. As I understand it, is it currently a sort of deterministic chatbot mechanism purely, or is that something you're starting to move towards, like machine learning based conversations?
Yeah, I mean, we'll never be. I can't imagine an end-to-end like deep neural net where Woebot is just generating things or just learning from the utterances of people, and then because that's actually been demonstrated to be like not a great way to build a chatbot. Your chatbot ends up kind of taking on some nasty characteristics.
Sure, Microsoft's experiment not that long ago comes to mind.
Right. But we do have algorithms, machine learning algorithms running in very key places. And so what we want to do is invest in making sure that the few algorithms that we have running are very, very accurate. And then in other places, we have found that it's not, the experience is not necessarily enhanced by having machine learning algorithms running everywhere, but where they are running, we want them to be really effective and accurate. So the answer is yes, we are. We do transition over sometimes where there is some real, I think, value to be gained from it. But everything, of course, everything that we do ultimately is about being able to build and deliver the best experience for our users that's likely to, be least intrusive and least risky, and also just like maximize the potential therapeutic benefit. So it's a bit of a, it's a balance, and it changes all the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting balance, because so I've got a bit of background in clinical research, and from the world of research, I think we both know that everything moves very slowly. You've got to go through all of the gradual processes and redesign your experiment over and over and over. But then you've got kind of the app world, the startup world of everything's rapid iteration and very explosive growth and so forth. How do you kind of balance those two philosophies? Because I understand you both have backgrounds in the kind of both of those worlds. So how do you balance those two drives?
I know, and actually one of our, board member, one of our, or like our chairman, is also like a Stanford professor, and so there's a strong sort of Stanford contingency here, and there's a strong philosophy in the belief in clinical validation and being research driven. I mean, that's actually why I founded the company. One of the reasons why I founded the company was just that, like, I saw a lot of people in the space of digital mental health and behavioral health who didn't necessarily have a strong background or training in it. And I began to lobby for our colleagues to get more involved with developing technology and partnering with technologists, so that we could, really converge these two fields in a meaningful way. And so I think the nice thing about having had that philosophy from the outset is that that was also a key component in the support that we've had as a company, and the frankly the decision to invest in us, because I think there's been a lot of attempts at solving this problem, trying to serve, people in their moment of need for mental health. And I think we're in this kind of third generation of solutions now. And I do believe that those people who have been looking for a solution that is meaningful for some time now do see that this isn't something that happens quickly. And it's not just, this isn't Candy Crush. It's not something you can just throw out to people. And, it's a much more complex problem. It's a deceivingly complex problem, right? We all think, well, I could be there for my friends, I'm pretty good at empathy. But translate that to a technology in a way that is meaningful, safe, non-repetitive, delightful. I mean, that's an art in and of itself. I hope that answers your question.
I see that too, just to add to Ali's well said points, I see that too as part of the responsibility of the digital therapeutics field, right? Is to find a way to bring the rigor of academia and science to it, and also balance, that it isn't something you just throw out there, that you have to be thoughtful about, that you have to be transparent about, that you have to work iteratively on. So I see that as sort of the field's responsibility as we continue to bring these products to people around the world.
Okay. So I think that raises an interesting question about the responsibilities of generally tech companies, but especially tech companies that are kind of getting into their users' minds. That's the core idea of the product. So who owns the data that Woebot generates, and is it anonymized? How do you kind of work with that responsibility?
We operate the philosophy, so it's very similar, like GDPR, basically, that people own the data, they should own their own data. So we do have the ability to allow people to download their data or delete it. And we were really thrilled to see GDPR actually coming online, because it was very similar to how we thought about the approach ourselves. I think with Woebot, like, trust is everything for us, and so we are as absolutely transparent as we can be. We believe that tech isn't perfect, neither is the in-person setting, neither is a filing cabinet. What is most important is that people are fully informed about how they proceed, and they make the decision themselves, right? Yeah, I mean, Athena actually is in charge of our privacy and regulation, so I'll let you. I'll stop talking and let you answer.
No, exactly. We worked really diligently towards GDPR compliance, and we have a whole set as well. In addition to that, of what we sort of call informed consent at the outset of registration for the application. So there's a series of screens that really someone must go through in order to begin the conversations with Woebot. And if they choose not to, that's okay. But it really is towards informing them, why are we asking these questions? What are we using your data for? We're basically using it to improve the Woebot experience and to tailor the conversation to you. How do you request deletion of your data, et cetera? So we really believe in, as Alison mentioned, that transparency to users up front. And it's always evolving and it's changing as new regulations come out and as people learn and make additional considerations about privacy. But it is something that we work on in an ongoing way.
What kind of future challenges do you think you see in privacy? I'm thinking particularly in terms of, so you mentioned earlier that people have a tendency to maybe not trust, but at least be more willing to confide in a digital chatbot than a typical therapist kind of face to face. I guess I'm interested in what frontiers we might see in privacy that we just haven't encountered with the traditional therapeutic relationship as a result of that kind of increased trust and the maybe the slightly more depersonal but nonetheless emotionally meaningful relationship formed between the patient and Woebot.
I mean, I think this is a great question, and one. But I would suggest a sort of slight reword in one
Sure.
sense. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't see Woebot as a therapist and the user as a patient. Yeah. Oh no, that's okay. Well, because I think the nuance here that is slightly the nuance is basically that there has been a lot of these self-directed programs for a long time, like self-help, we call self-help and guided self-help, where there is a guide. And I would see Woebot more like an automated guide. And the guide traditionally in these interventions is somebody that sort of like checks in with someone, keeps them accountable, and then says, oh, geez, it sounds like you had a rough week. Like, go back to chapter 8. I think that might be useful. That is what it would look like traditionally. And we think of Woebot in the same way. Woebot is directing the user to content, but I think more than it being a kind of quote unquote trusted relationship, the experience is more of a solid understanding that you are doing this yourself. I mean, that is actually part of why the Woebot persona is so obviously robotic. So obviously, hey, I'm an AI. He will often say things like, I don't necessarily understand what you're saying, but I'm going to ask you the right questions, right? So it's very much your process that is facilitated by the right questions being asked at the right time and things. The other thing I would say is, because of that format, because it is much more like an interactive choose your own adventure workbook from very, very good, solid clinical sort of skill base, it's not the kind of bot where somebody comes in and just sort of talks endlessly about what's going on in their lives. So the kinds of things that people are sharing are their negative thoughts. And of course, Beck, who was one of the original creators of cognitive behavioral therapy, actually pointed out this truth, which is basically what he called cognitive specificity. So people's negative thoughts look very like other people's negative thoughts in the same emotional context. So somebody's anxious thoughts, which is really what we're asking somebody, or somebody's, when they're depressed, their kind of negative thoughts, are things like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm going to fail. What if I'm not good enough? I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not X enough, right? And what's interesting is that it's so true. And part of the reason why I wanted to create Woebot was that I saw this among the patients I was seeing. People don't tend to say the same types of things. People say exactly the same thing. Like, I'm not space enough is probably the most common cognitive distortion that we have. And so that's the kind of data that we're talking about getting, not my name is XX, I live at this address, this is right. And it might sound like a nuance, but the other piece, of course, the most important piece, is that everybody's data is anonymized. So it's probably the most important. And we do, as Athena said, like this is our topic of conversation all the time. And where are those boundaries? And when do we, where are the edges? Because there isn't clear delineation, especially in a new field. But even though when people download Woebot, they can provide an email address such that if they, get a new phone or lose it, they can get their data back. Where their conversational data is stored is actually separate to the email. So the traceability is really tough. So these are great conversations that are had all the time. Basically.
And I think that it's such an important conversation to have, because just as you say, you've got this this wealth of data that you in your practice are making these connections between, okay, I had a patient last week who was saying this, and a patient last month who was saying a similar thing, and one last year who reminds me of that. But if you can put this all together into a global database of people, cross-cultural, cross age groups, etc., and start to aggregate these little bits of data to identify commonalities, then we can potentially go beyond the traditional sort of CBT and go to even more complex systems that we might not be able to even imagine yet, but that could be driven by these very large data sets. So I think that's why I'm asking the question, because it's just it's so much opportunity.
Right. But handled carefully. Yeah, I agree. Absolutely handled carefully. It reminds me of one of my teachers who taught me, one of my mentors at Stanford who taught me how to do CBT, basically always said that he said people with it, when you're helping somebody with depression, when you're helping them recover, the kind of realization moment that they have is that they're not that bad. They're not bad people. That they're actually just like everybody else. And when you're helping somebody with anxiety, the realization they have is the thing that they were afraid of most is actually nothing to be afraid of. That the monster they fear has no teeth. And what's incredible is that you get that perspective when you see a lot of patients, a lot of people over time, whereas the person who's suffering thinks it's just them. So yeah, just reminded me of that.
As someone who's been dealing with quite a lot of anxiety and depression over the last few years, I very much feel like that's making those connections and being aware of other people experiencing these things can be a powerful boost. So I guess getting a bit more kind of speculative, where do you see Woebot and similar tools going over the next 5, 10, 20 years? What kind of modalities, what indications?
I'll let Athena answer this one. She's working on this right now.
No, it's a great question. So we really do want to continue to evolve and to try to fill spaces where people are in need. So towards that, we are trying to build a suite of products for specific clinical indications. And we are working to refine those and test the feasibility and acceptability of those. We have academic partnerships with different universities towards doing early stage pilot studies, as well as more sophisticated RCTs. So we are definitely iterating towards more kind of clinically specific products. The product that we have right now out in the market that's available in Google Play and the App Store is what we sort of consider our wellness product that's readily available for anybody and downloadable today. But the other products we are hoping become prescription-based, and so that people who maybe have a higher level of need and want a more structured, fenced-in experience will be able to access these programs for specific clinical indications.
Well, that's very exciting, and I mean, it makes sense to start with the the mass market kind of wellness thing, get the research money together, so you can start doing larger scale clinical trials, and then scale up. That's good business strategy. So yeah, that's really exciting. I guess I'll kind of wrap up my section with what uh, what specific indications do you think might be promising targets for kind of chatbot and machine learning based therapies over the next few years? Obviously, I don't want to like pin you down to anything too specific, but what are you excited about the possibility of treating?
Yeah, we're excited about so much. I mean, I think that's probably right. Part of our problem is our general level of enthusiasm having to focus.
Yeah.
I can share that, you know, we have been recipients of a National Institutes of Drug Abuse, NIDA, which is a division of NIMH award. And so we are actively funded to look at development of a Woebot specific product for individuals with substance use disorder. So that, as an example, is something that we are sharing about, and we are really looking forward to. And I think it's something that really speaks to just the viability of digital therapeutics, particularly in like a system where we are right now. You know, with COVID-19, we have all been so humbled by provider stretched healthcare ecosystems and folks really trying to do their best to follow shelter in place and social distancing recommendations, but people are still in need. The need hasn't ceased despite the presence of all these things. So I really think when I think about like the substance use disorder product or other products we may be developing, I really am hopeful that this is an opportunity to get to those people who are otherwise maybe unable to reach out and touch their support systems like they used to be able to.
Particularly in more rural areas of the United States, where opioid addiction is a huge ravaging problem. Hopefully into the developing world where traditional therapies aren't as available. That's fantastic. Well, I'll pass back to Raymond now, but I've got to say I'm very excited, and you've got a cool product on your hands.
Thank you, Laurie. That's lovely. That's really nice to hear.
To round the interview off, we have 2 questions that we ask all the speakers on the Happiness Festival. And this one's quite relevant, which is, what does happiness actually mean to both of you?
I love this question, and I won't tell a lie. I knew it was coming because you guys kind of indicated it was coming. So I've been trying to think a little bit about, gosh, what does that mean? And I was thinking, I do believe in like the sound of it being universally compelling, right? There's something about that word that compels all of us intrinsically, I think, as humans. But I do think it's more than what we first give it a glance to be, right? I do think it's more than just the presence of contentedness. I think it's also kind of the ability to self-evaluate accurately, right? And this is really sort of the CBT therapist in me, that it's not just a mood state, it's also the real life living of how my thoughts and my self-evaluation reflect reality, and how I'm appraising myself to be living like sort of a values congruent lifestyle. Are my values brought to life in my actions, et cetera. And I also think in terms of mindfulness, it's an ability to be moderated or mindful of how much attention my worries get. Unfortunately, I think as humans, we get really good at giving our worries a lot of attention, a lot of brain space. And so I think in part happiness is about modulating that and being grounded in that regard.
Well, I don't know how I'm supposed to top that, but exactly it. I mean, just what Athena said. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think of, I guess there's lots of definitions, and the contentment certainly would be the thing that I experience. And I think I also experience happiness when I'm not actually, interestingly enough, experiencing myself, right? Like I'm sort of lost in something, and that can happen in a state of flow when I'm working on something that I'm really enjoying, or it can happen when I'm playing with my son, or just taking a walk in nature. And I guess that I mean, is that mindfulness, Athena, or is that not mindfulness? Actually, I'm not sure what that is.
I think it's mindfulness. I think that sounds nice.
And something else that we know is going to make any researcher very happy is that if you had all the money in the world to do whatever research you could, what would it be?
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh, guys, it's so good. Yeah.
That's such a good question.
Gosh, I would kind of just do more of what we're doing. So more clinical indications, right? There's the enthusiasm again, more clinical indications, more partnerships with people worldwide, more getting into the rural spots, like Lori said, more getting into underserved populations. So just scaling up as much as possible. Really continuing our conversations with people on the ground and providers on the ground about what they need, what will help them prescribe these digitals to people in need, what will help people get to their providers to request these digitals. Those are just some things off the top of my head.
Those to the pipeline, Athena. That's great. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think exactly what Athena said. It would be something with Woebot. I mean, this has been the kind of ultimate place in which, I found my research career go, and something I can, massively 100% believe in. And it would be those things where it's traditionally, more difficult to get funding, like Woebot in, developing countries at scale. I've also been thinking lately a lot about that kind of, there's an interesting moment with Woebot when you've challenged your thoughts and you're kind of going along with the process, and then he asks you to rewrite the negative thought, and when you do that, there is this moment of it can feel quite magic when it works. And having done a lot of neuroimaging studies, I'd love to stick someone in a scanner and just look at what's going on in that moment.
Amen. I would be interested to see that work. Probably not too hard as well, because you wouldn't actually need to get the phone in there. You could use, a mirror and.
Exactly. I don't think it's that complex. Let's collaborate. Let's get offline, Laurie, and talk about it.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been absolutely amazing hearing about Woebot and the amazing work that you've done.
Oh, thank you very much. This was such a great time. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was fantastic.
Oh, brilliant, guys. Thanks. Awesome. Have a great rest of your day. No
You
worries.
too.
Thanks all.